Hey guys, welcome back to the Pepetto podcast. I hope you're great. I hope you've had a good week. It's currently Friday when I'm recording this episode, and I have a very special episode today because I'm here with my friend Nele. I said that I was helping her move into Berlin, and we're in Berlin right now. But I'm going to start today's episode before we get into what we kind of want to talk about today. Going to get into a few life updates, and it's been just a week since I've seen you guys, and a lot has happened so far. I mean, nothing really materialistic has happened, but in my head a lot has happened, and the kind of advice I want to give you guys straight away in this episode is to do things for you and not anyone else. I've been struggling with this a lot recently with, as I said in my last episode, about my current job and what I want to do. Do I want to have a break? Do I want to pursue the jobs that I've had interviews for recently? And this is something that I've very much been struggling with, but being here in Berlin with my best friend who I see not even once a year has really helped me realize that I've got to do it for myself. Even if, you know, it's good to hold account for those advice that your parents are giving you, your friends, but ultimately it's up to you what you do. So that's the first piece of advice I want to give you, and that kind of sums up the life updates, to be honest, because nothing else has happened. Just if you're in a similar situation, I know a lot of you might be starting university this year. If you're not sure about it, I'm not saying don't go, but I'm saying have a good think about it, and of course try things out, try things that you've never done before, because you never know what could happen. But at the end of the day, everything is just your decision. So as I said, I'm here with Nele in Berlin, and it's been 1.5 years. It's been a long time.
Too long.
But I'm finally back here again, and now it's going to be so much easier to see each other because it's like a 2-hour flight away, not even that.
Even though Ellie thinks it's 1 hour due to time difference.
Yeah. That is true though, and you know, in my mind it is 1 hour, but it's fine.
I mean, time says so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've been here for what, almost a week now?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm back again. It's really crazy what has happened in the last 1.5 years, because the first time we recorded our first episode together, I didn't even have a podcast yet. By now I have a podcast, and this was really like starting off. So uploading that first episode on Elle's podcast really helped me get into my own podcast, and yeah, it's been growing ever since, which has been really exciting.
And because of that, you've just published your own book.
Yeah, I guess because it was part of the journey of like growing and just realizing that I could do much more than I thought I could.
Mm-hmm.
Like growing out of imposter syndrome, something else we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But like just realizing that I'm so much more powerful and I'm so much more creative than I thought I was. So yeah, really spontaneously I decided to take part in this competition, in this book writing competition. So within 2 weeks I wrote my first book.
And it's good as well. I mean, I've only read the prologue so far, but it's so far so good, and it's Nele, so of course it's going to be good.
It's a really Nele thing to do,
Yeah.
just write a book within 2 weeks and like publish it. So go buy it, because it would be really amazing if I won the competition. I could go to Cologne and read my book. And yeah, there's a lot of exciting things about it, and hopefully today, maybe eventually during this podcast, actually someone will ring the bell and bring me my first book.
The actual like hard copies of the book. But I'll put the information in the show notes below, and it's also on my social media if you want to go and buy it. I mean, it's not available in the UK to buy at the moment. What is it in? Germany, Austria?
Oh, a lot of countries.
Mainly Europe, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's you can't buy it yet, but there is an online version for everyone to view. So in the UK, if that's what you want to do, I'll put that link down below as well.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's that.
So today's episode is going to be a bit deeper than usual, just because that's what we tend to do when we're here. The deep chats we have is quite amusing. But this was kind of like Nele's idea. We've been speaking about it the last couple of days, and as soon as I arrived on Wednesday evening, we did a bit of meditation.
Which is really nice, because a friend of mine in Denmark who I just stayed with recently, she's sending me WhatsApp messages every single day, which is the 21 Days of Abundance with Deepak Chopra. I can only recommend it. It's really incredible. So there's some inner work exercises that you'll have to do, and then like a 12 to 15 minute meditation every single day, and it's called the 21 Days of Abundance, and it's been really intense and healing and very revealing and reflective. So there was this one exercise yesterday actually, which was talking about the cocoon and the butterfly, which has been our metaphor ever since, Ellie's and mine, because my friend told me about it a bit earlier.
Yeah.
So we knew about it a bit earlier, but then yesterday I did that exercise. And it basically talks about how caterpillars live in cocoons before they form butterflies. And in order to become a butterfly, a caterpillar needs to eat its way through the cocoon. But within this process, in the body of the caterpillar, there's some fluid being released from the body into the to-be wings. So basically this episode of winding itself out through the holes that it's bitten out of the cocoon, the caterpillar only starts to transform into the butterfly, and only this eating out permits it to turn into a butterfly, especially because that's the metaphor behind it. You need to go through growth and periods of pain and periods of excruciatingly annoying and
just a shit time.
Hard phases of your life until you're stronger and until you're better. So there was this woman who was watching the caterpillar and tried helping it by ripping off pieces of the cocoon. But what happened is that this fluid that's normally moved from the body into the wings wasn't moved because the caterpillar didn't have to wind its way through the hole. So what this woman did is stop its growth and disable it from being able to grow into a butterfly. Mm-hmm. And this is how we kind of came up with this topic and realized that we wanted to talk about how a lot of things actually. So number one, inner child healing in general, and then also how we feel like when are we able to teach and preach things to people, especially in our pods, on our blogs, on our internet pages where we're writing, and when are we actually hindering someone growing because they just have to learn their lessons themselves.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like I mentioned before, we want to talk about imposter syndrome and how much of that thinking and believing that we are not supposed to share advice is just imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to start as well, because my last but one episode was about that topic as well. As we've both been feeling it with, do we have a right to share this kind of stuff on our podcast, on our blog? And it's something that I feel a lot of people feel, especially those that have a presence on social media, because it feels like everyone's doing it at the moment, and what makes me different to share this? Like, what makes me so special to give people advice?
Exactly. So that's something we've been both battling with, and one thing I realized is that on one side, it's not my own voice in my head, because I come from a very spiritual side. Also, since the last time we talked, now I'm a certified yoga and meditation teacher.
Oh yeah.
So I'm so much I grew so much more into my own spirituality and realized so much more on the spiritual path. And one of those things is that the voices in our heads aren't our own, because it's just conditioning from our parents, from society, from teachers, things we heard in our childhood and things we believe to be true. But then one of those voices is telling me that I'm not entitled to give advice because I'm 21 and I'm so young, and there's people out there who have much more experience, much more wisdom. But then I do know a lot about life because I do have a lot of life experience, and I've gained a lot of life experience in the past 3 years. And just because I don't have as much life experience as someone who's 50 years old, that doesn't mean that my advice isn't valuable.
Yeah.
Because people can learn from me, and also how we move and how we learn differently in generations. Our generation has valuable things to say to the generation of our parents and to the generation of our grandparents, just as much as they can teach us too.
Yeah.
And we have learned from our parents our whole lives. So maybe it's time that they also learn from us.
Yeah. Because we all experience things differently, as you said, and it's about holding on to that and even admitting to it. No one lives the exact same life. We were saying this earlier, me and my sister, we're twins, we had the same upbringing, but we never experienced the same thing.
Exactly.
And we're completely different people, and just remembering that as well, that we all have different experiences, but everyone has the right to share those experiences and those opinions, because without that, nobody would.
Exactly.
And you don't have to be, sometimes I'm I'm not qualified as a counsellor, or even someone like that, I don't have the qualifications to give the advice I do, but I have the experience, and to me that's even more beneficial.
Yeah, and as long as we don't say we're counsellors when we're
exactly.
not, that's we have a podcast, so that is literally what we're supposed to do, is just ramble off of topics that seem important to us, and just because talking about our experience, like you say.
Yeah, and in a way that's a qualification. Like, we have a podcast.
Exactly. We have a podcast and we are podcasters, so there is people wanting to listen to the podcast and we don't force anybody to listen to it.
No, yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing. So I feel like it's a topic that we could go on about for a really long time, because I've noticed that I was always preaching things that I wanted to or had to hear most, and I was also preaching to this other person who really influenced me a lot in my life, and I only realized recently that all my texts were basically dedicated to the both of us. So I was writing to us and then always writing in, you should do this, this is what you should do. But then in my new book, I really wanted to focus on, I did this is how I did it, and just let people be inspired by it if they want to. Because I feel like you also push people away when you tell them, you need to do this is how you should do it. More than, I went through this type of situation, this is how I dealt with it.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because at the moment with my blog, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I've gone back to that kind of, here's some tips for dealing with whatever, and it's like you this, you that, and I've strayed away from this is my experience, because I feel like people don't care. Again, that imposter syndrome of like, who cares about this experience, who am I to say that? But in a way that helps people more than me just saying, this is what you need to do. 10 tips for motivation. Like, no one cares about that.
It's not personal. That's the thing. I think people do care about it. There's a lot of people who care about that type of content because it helps them. It helped me for a long time.
Yeah.
But then I just grew into more personal things and started following more the biographies of people and how they grew, and just being able to compare myself to them instead of hearing, do this. Because I learned that when I read things like, do this to get better, it doesn't really help me. That what helps me is seeing inspiring stories, and then having the time to have a flip switch in my mind and be like, oh my god, click, this is what I want to do too, I could do this. And like, exactly that, eating my way out of the cocoon.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, we were asking ourselves, where is the point, or where is the border of ripping off a cocoon, or like biting it open for someone else, and then guiding them towards the hole in the cocoon? There was a situation we had yesterday, or actually we've had it a few times. Yeah. And not only yesterday, but yesterday I grew like actively conscious of the fact that we were talking about Ellie and her relationships in her past, and then me also having lived through some relationships that I wouldn't do again. And just trying to fix her relationships, even though there's necessarily nothing broken with it, just because I want to make sure that she doesn't live the same pain I did, and just to make sure that I also don't go through the same pain with her, being by her side all the time, mentally and spiritually, and amen. Not physically, but hopefully more often now. Yeah. But we were asking ourselves, where is the point of pushing people towards growth and then guiding people by asking reflective questions, something Ellie doesn't like so much. Yeah. So what's your approach to that? How do you tell in your podcast or your blog, okay, now I'm just guiding people and now I might actually be pushing too hard?
Well, it is really hard, that kind of borderline between the two, because I don't want to force anyone into a journey that they're not ready for. But then, I mean, you guys listening to this right now, in a way, you are already ready or wanting to start this journey. So this isn't me forcing you to do it, because I can't force you. You're just listening to my podcast. Like, there's no force behind it. It's not a drug that I'm asking you to take, or it's nothing negative I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to do this. I'm saying that this is my experience and Nele's experience of how positive it can be. But by all means, most people in life don't do a healing journey. They don't go down this road. But then you look at people and think, you want people to go down that road, but you can't force them to. And it's so hard when you see a friend or someone who seems blatantly just miserable with their life, with their job, with their partner, with their family, or whatever it is. They just seem sad, and
you can't help them.
Because most of the time people don't want to be helped.
Exactly.
And our goal here isn't to make those people aware that they need help. We share our stories for those people that want the help already, and that's the borderline between it.
Very well said, because I wouldn't have been sure how to answer that question, because for me, I am in that phase right now, figuring out where I'm not pushing too hard. And I think I've just, by realizing that I don't want to direct it to them, but talk more about me, my experiences, that is already my step into, well, I'm just guiding forever who wants it, for whoever wants it, rather than you need to do this, you need to do that, you're shit if you don't do this.
Yeah.
That's not what I said before, but in my mind, reading back on it, it felt a bit more entitled.
Yeah.
And like feeling as if I was superior to someone, rather than, well, here's some tips if you want them.
Yeah, and that's our goal. It's not, we're not entitled or superior because we've done it. One, the healing journey is never completed.
Yeah.
Two, we're only at the very start of it.
Yeah.
And with the healing journey, you can start it and then put it on hold. And that's okay too. Like, you can feel like there's something too painful to go through, put it on hold, get on with your life. But then as long as you keep coming back to it, if you're ready and if you want to, that's all we're here for. We're here to give our experiences to guide you when you want to be guided. And
exactly.
It's also up to you. Like, you're listening to this podcast because you've seen the title and you think,
yeah,
that's something that I want to listen to. So it's never us forcing it down your throat or anything at all.
Exactly. And that also, for me, goes into when are we actually affected by the voice of our inner child and by these, what's the word, like society implemented or childhood implemented voices in our head during our daily lives. Because I think very, very often this imposter syndrome or insecurity or whatever comes up for us just because we were made to believe that we are not worthy of sharing our own stories or guiding others just because we're so young. So our inner child, number one, we all have one. Our inner child is this psychological concept of our inner kid that hasn't been healed. So it's about our 4-year-old or 6-year-old, however old yours is. You can explore that in various types of therapies. Our kid that received some kind of pain or went through some kind of hurting episodes and couldn't really deal with the pain because it didn't know how to, that is still stored within you. And this kid has voices that still come up during our daily lives, and our ego is basically just a reflection of our inner kid and like trying to protect itself, trying to be defensive. Then there's so many other voices like anger. All our emotions are basically in our inner child and are just unreleased feelings from the past. So it's all very intertwined and very connected, and I could talk about this in a whole own episode. But I feel like for me especially, this imposter syndrome of like, oh my god, am I actually allowed to guide people just because I haven't been on earth so long, is a lot of my inner child speaking and just being insecure.
And being scared of people judging you as well.
Yeah.
That comes into it, and it's
a lot.
It's all of these. I mean, I speak about this with my therapist every single week, these expectations that I believe at the start of my therapy sessions was society expectations. But who made them up? I made them up. All these expectations I have on when I should get married, when I should have kids, what job I should have, when I should be making this much money. And all of these things is when I think that's society making those expectations on me, when it's not. It's my own expectations and my own judgment on myself and my inner child as well.
Exactly.
And it's
your own judgment on yourself always is your inner child trying to protect you.
Yeah. And I was saying to you as well, like, that you wouldn't say any of these things to your younger self, to your inner child, to your 4-year-old. And I was saying something that I do like regularly with, if I feel shit or I'm being really hard on myself, especially like late at night when we all spiral, because we all do it. When I'm in that spiral, I imagine, I mean, after I've cried for a bit, I don't do this straight away. I'm not that strong. I don't think anyone is. But and that's okay too. But I sit and I imagine my younger self, it's usually my 6-year-old self, is sitting on the edge of the bed, and she's just watching me cry and being hard on myself and telling myself that I'm failing, or I'm not trying hard enough, or I'm not a good daughter, girlfriend, sister, person, like whatever that is that day, maybe all of them. And then I imagine myself telling that to her, like I'm looking in a mirror and that's her in front of me. You would not want to tell your younger self that. Maybe you were told that when you were that age, or whatever you've been through that age to cause you to think that. You might not have. I've experienced that later in life, but you'd never say that to yourself. You wouldn't say that to a friend either. Yeah. And I think perspective sometimes is useful. Like, of course, always validate your feelings, and I say this a lot.
Yeah, but it's just a helpful way of how to validate your feelings. Yeah. I really feel like this is such a beautiful exercise, because for me it actually doesn't work so well to say, oh, just imagine you wouldn't talk like that to your best friend. And I'm like, that doesn't really work for me, because I can't envision them enough, because I'm too caught up in my feelings. Yeah. So that's why I actually put up a picture of my 3 or 4-year-old self next to my bed, because I'm going to be able to look at her. She's grinning wildly. I'm grinning wildly on that picture, looking at some bouquet of flowers. Yeah. And it makes me really happy looking at that picture, because I'm like, I would never talk to her like that. Ever. So I need the visual help of it, because imagining it for me is not enough, for example. But it's so beautiful that you intuitively came up with this exercise, because I don't think you read it anywhere. It just felt right to you. So it's a really amazing way of validating your emotions, and also reminding yourself of, like you say, perspective and reality, because validating your emotions does not mean discarding reality. Yeah. Because our reality is that in the moment that we are sad, and that there's a moment that needs, like, you just need a moment to process those feelings, and those feelings might be old, those feelings might be right now, or triggering something you experienced in the past. But then, like, not trash talking yourself. It's not invalidating your emotions at all, because when you trash talk yourself, this is invalidating your emotions. Yeah. So you just help to put that into perspective, and to be able to feel and validate your emotions even more. Yeah.
And again, it's always different for everyone. So that exercise always, well, not even always, sometimes I'm that far into my spiral that nothing will help, and I just have to sit there and cry. And the next morning I can then either get on with my life or cry some more, and that's fine too.
It is so healthy.
Yeah. And so this kind of thing, like anything we speak about, like everything I share to you on my podcast, I always say, like, this is what works for me. And again, not all the time, like it depends every single day. So I know that might be hard to hear if you're like, oh my God, I just want some tools that will help me. Most of the time they won't work, and you have to find the one specific thing that will work for you. But then don't be upset if it doesn't work every single time, because sometimes emotions are too painful to anything to help. Yeah.
It's really interesting, because one thing I learned in the last 3 years, which is when my self-development journey started, is I figured out so many different ways of how to help myself. And in the beginning I always thought, okay, this is the way how I'm going to deal with sadness. And then 2 weeks later it was something different. Yeah. I was like, shit, this is not working. Right. What am I going to do? And it's just been so many different things that have helped me over time, that now I'm at this point where I say, well, the only thing that really helps for me is feeling the emotion. Yeah. Feeling the emotion is priority number 1 when an emotion comes up for me, if you're in a space where you feel safe enough to express it. And then there's a lot of other things that have helped me to be able to cope with it. But then feeling the emotion is number 1, because that is the most important thing, to release the emotion, because it's a stored blockage in our bodies. And the beauty in it is that we can find so many different ways to cope, and I found so many over the years. Let's try and find some. One of them has definitely been therapy. Another one has been drawing, or going for a walk, or listening to my best hype music, or just lying in bed for a while journaling, or not journaling, just feeling. Or also coping for me has always been food and series, so some kind of consumption that will kind of stitch up or like fill the hole, the void I feel inside myself.
And I don't think that's a bad thing either.
Yeah, it's just something that I survived on for the last years, and it's just something I want to slowly move away from, because it's also not very healthy to binge watch just because you don't want to feel your emotions. Yeah. And I always feel shit after doing it, but I just knew that I needed it. So 12 hours of Netflix sometimes is the best thing to do. Yeah. If it helps you just push away those emotions far enough until you feel ready to deal with them. Because every single time I do this, at some point there will be a scene in the series where somebody cries or something sad happens, and then I cry and break down completely.
Yeah. But then that's what you needed at that time. It's like, I do that a lot, where, I mean, my sleeping routine has gone to shit recently, and I do fall asleep to Netflix every night, but then that's my way of coping with what I'm going through right now. Like, I know it's not healthy. I've been doing this for 6 months or more, and I know it's not healthy, and I say to you, and I feel quite hypocritical, because I'm always saying about do these wellness things and heal, but this is me being honest with you that I don't heal all the time. It's not a thing that you do all the time. You have to do it actively.
Yeah.
Even if sometimes it's like, yeah, but you're always healing. You're not.
And the beauty in it is also to give yourself the time and space and to realize that these podcasts and blogs you're doing are so much for yourself too.
Yeah, well, I use this as my diary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's something you want to strive for also. It doesn't mean like you're doing all of that. You can read back and be like, oh yeah, that's an advice I gave. I can do that.
Yeah, and that's something that I need to do. I need to listen back to my podcasts.
Yeah.
Or even just read my blogs when I'm on a train somewhere or on my way to work. I need to just remind myself that on my bad days, I can give myself that advice, but I just don't listen to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I do feel hypocritical, because I don't take my own advice.
That's all right.
Even though it is good advice.
That's all right. And I think that's something we can learn too, because we are just 21 and we have all this advice. But most of what we share is just what we ourselves need to hear most.
Yeah.
So that is the beauty, that we can reflect on it and realize that, oh, this is what I just want to do myself so bad and I just cannot yet.
Yeah.
But we're going to get there.
Yeah, and that's what, I mean, whenever I do have a breakdown or something, if it's with my dad or my boyfriend, or, I mean, it's mainly those two, and they always say, listen to Pepetto, because that's my alter ego, and that's who it's not even like I strive to be, but it is like literally my alter ego. It's another version of myself that when I'm struggling, I need to listen to her. And it's kind of like my younger self. It's another version of me, because we have loads of different versions of us. Like, we're a different version with everyone we speak to. We change even our accent, our language, our vocabulary, who we are, which is sad in a way that sometimes we have to
I feel like it's so beautiful.
But yeah, because we have all these different versions of ourselves, and different people experience who we are in a different way.
Yeah.
Which is so lucky to have. Like, I'm experiencing a different version of you to who your parents see you, or your sister, or your other friends. Like, every single one of your friends experience you differently.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that's what makes it so exciting to carry on with this kind of journey. Like, that's what excites me with it.
Yeah. And I also feel like, I think listening back to this is going to be really different than listening back to the one we did 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because we've changed so much, and I just feel that I'm so much calmer in it. Not because I'm not anxious anymore about like recording a podcast, because last time I was.
Yeah.
But more because I feel more reflected and more peaceful within my true self. And I think what you call your alter ego is just the voice of your soul, your intuition.
Yeah.
So I just think it's your purest self and the best version of you that you strive to be. And it is you. You don't have to detach yourself from it, because it is you. That's something so nice that I always forget about, that all of this is me, and all of that I have published. It's not my intuition is published, or no, it's all me. Even though it's all different versions, it's still all me.
Yeah, and it's your highest version of yourself as well.
Exactly.
Which is so exciting to think. Sometimes when you feel shit in your like journey right now, you think, but I've done this. And even if you don't have a blog or a podcast, or even if you think you haven't done things, you have done things, whether that's land a job interview, land a job, or even things like you've let go of a friend, or you've broken up with someone, or you've just got into a relationship. All of these things that you've done in your life, whether you think it's good or bad, it's still your highest self looking out for yourself.
Yeah. And on the one, like, sometimes it will be survival, other times it will be literally your highest self striving for your best version.
Yeah.
So.
And she is in there.
She's there.
Yeah.
She's always there. And we can go to the more spiritual side of it and talk about how meditation has helped me so much, informed me so much too, because there were so many voices going on in my head a year ago, and then I went on a 5 months interrail trip completely alone, just couch surfing, basically living on couches and in trains.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the first time in my life I kind of got out I started being completely honest with myself, and I just got out everything I ever wanted to say without being ashamed for saying it to my journals. So that was the first time I kind of managed to switch off the voices in my head and just listen to myself, to my intuition. And meditation just helps you to be able to distinguish which voice is that true self, and which voice is that inner child just wanting to protect itself, and which voice is that inner child just surviving. So just being aware of who's talking to you right now, and from which energy you're acting, from whose energy you're acting, changes your life completely. Because once you reflected about your habits, whether they're good, whether you label them as good or bad, I feel like it's the key to everything. And that's where the turning point
kind of starts.
It is, yeah. And it's not judging yourself for doing it. If
Yeah.
you're on a healing journey, like I vape and I'm on a healing journey, yeah, I do judge myself for that because it's vaping, and that's like a big extreme, but as I said, like I fall asleep to Netflix most nights. It's stuff like this, like even on this kind of journey, you will still have habits, whether you labelled them again as good or bad. I mean, I know some of those habits are bad, but
No, that's how you label them still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's about being patient with yourself and acknowledging them. And I think everything from every emotion to every habit to everything we say or we do, it's about being aware of it.
Exactly.
Because through high school, and I've said this to you a lot, I've said I was a bitch during high school.
Label?
A label from other people and myself.
Yeah.
Because I look back, and I wasn't a nice person most of the time, but then I look back and again, that's me judging myself for that. And part of what I've been doing over the last few years is to almost make up for that. That's why I try so hard with my relationships and my friends, because I went through all of that to push people away because I was going through literally just puberty. That's all I was going through. But that led to me pushing people away. So now I have to try so hard and this is what I speak about in therapy a lot, which is why I don't really share it on here, but I think this is a good time to do that. I have to make up for it now. Again, this is me making up things in my head, but it feels like I have to in order to gain people back into my life. And that's why I don't have a lot of people in my life, because the energy it takes for me to do that is extraordinary.
Thank you for sharing. And it makes me feel very appreciated as a friend too. Like very valuable.
Yeah, but this is exactly what I mean. This is all these expectations and judgment we've made for ourselves.
Exactly.
Thinking we have to make up for things we've done in the past, which... I mean, some people might look at it from a religious point of view with our sins from the past and we've got to make up for it.
Or karma from spiritual.
Yeah, and in a way, I do understand that because that's kind of what I'm doing now. But we don't have to label it either. Like, I'm aware that I do it and I'm working on it, but it's not something that we have to feel bad for, because I've done my kind of recounting my sins and feeling bad for it. I've done that stage, but I don't have to feel like that every day. Like, whatever I did and who I was back then isn't who I am now. And
you don't owe anybody shit to make up for it, because I feel like maybe you're not making up for it. Might it be that you're just another version now? Yeah. You're just somebody else. Yeah. And maybe it's not like, you learned from the past and that's your lesson, but I wouldn't necessarily say I get that you're feeling like you have to make up, but I just think it's a new you. Yeah. You just learned. You just moved on.
I think both are partially right. So I stumbled there, but both are right in the same way that these are like my judgments on myself, but then it is also like, this is a new me and I value friendships now. I value relationships, and back then all I valued was academics and being popular and being good at sport, as every teenager does in a way. Like, no teenager I know of is on a healing journey because you've not gone through it yet. All you can think about is your mood swings, your puberty,
yourself.
Literally, and everyone is selfish. Everyone then is a bitch during high school. Everyone is the exact same. Everyone pushes people away. It's not your fault.
That's another topic that we are just going to brush on with one sentence. I don't want to unravel it now, but it is not your fault what you've gone through. It's just your responsibility to deal with it now, because you don't want to be like the people who hurt you. Period. This is just the only thing I'm saying to touch on this topic. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I feel like it's so important to make up with your past versions, because all of them were you, and all of them permitted you to be who you are today, because they permitted you to learn all these lessons and then end up where you are today. So that's something I'm also working on so hard, because I said my healing and self-exploration and development started 3 years ago, but I despise the person I was before that. There's like a literal cut before I went to Mexico in my mind and be like, this is where you were a bad version, this is where you started to be a better version.
But no versions of you are bad.
Exactly, and that's also just a label. Yeah. And all of them brought me here, and the person I was before I was 18 was basically just surviving and just doing the best she could too.
And you were a child.
And I was a child. And also it was so interesting because I talked to some friends about how they viewed me as a high school teenager. And I always had such a bad picture of myself from, let's say, 10 to 18. Mm-hmm. But they were like, I saw you as this bubbly, giggly, optimistic, really kind person. I was like, excuse me? Excuse me? What are you saying? Like, I had no idea.
And that's just, again, the labels we put on ourselves. And it does always come back to that judgment thing. But I think we are going around in circles a little bit here. And I think that the moral of this is just to have, like, hold that person who you used to be in your heart and tell her that it wasn't her fault. And that isn't, like, she isn't a bad version of who you are now. She was just one of the versions of you. And that's something that we do have to come to terms with as part of this journey, is looking back at our past selves with whatever we went through or didn't go through, like being a teenager or going through traumas or going through really shit things in our life. That's not your fault, any of those things. And it's our responsibility, as Nele said, to go through them in our own pace, in our own time. And from there, that's when we can grow. But not until we forgive our past selves and we hold them in our heart as, again, like a gratitude practice, that we forgive them for what they went through and for the things they might have done because of that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's not their fault.
It is not their fault. And that is also implementing that it's not your fault right now. Because before we make peace with that person we aren't really able to forgive our person now, ourselves now. Because all of the emotions we held back then and all the negative feelings we have against that person back then, we have against our present self too, because it is still us. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's really, really important to start this healing journey and be brave enough to look at the pain, but then not rush into it either. And as this is a good thing to wrap it up. Now listen, don't rip off the cocoon. So we don't want to rip off the cocoon, but just give ourselves time to wind our way through the hole we bit into the cocoon.
And with that, I wish you all a very good week, and I'll speak to you very soon, and hopefully I'll have some more updates for you next week with some exciting things hopefully happening soon. But with that...
And some more content with me.
Yes, definitely. But with that, I'll leave Nele's podcast, her blog, her socials in the show notes below. And yeah.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye.